If you bolt S15 suspension to any car, does it make it a good drift car? We're here with Joel to get more info on his GTZ. So Joel, this is a interesting choice for a drift car, maybe not the most common. Can you talk us through basically what this car started out as?
Yeah, so definitely not the most common drift car. Definitely gave myself a bit of a challenge. So it's an original 1971 Datsun 240Z. So what we did is we took a bit of Datsun out of it and we transplanted some later model S15 suspension components in it, and then somehow horseshoe a VR38 engine into the front of it. So.
Cool, so we'll get into all the details in a second, but before you got to do any of that, did you try to drift it as it was kind of factory setup at all?
No, not at all, because I bought it as not even a rolling shell. It was literally just a rusted out shell at a farm. So it was it had quite a hard life, so we sort of went in there and resurrected it and just started doing bare metal chassis restoration, and then we started beginning to build the roll cage around it. So the first time I drove it was under the GDR power.
So in terms of the suspension, we'll start there because that's such a key point when it comes to drifting. Was it just an easy thing to go straight to a S15 setup? It's a proven system that works pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody knows that an S15 or just a Sylvia McPherson strut front steering is probably the most researched and developed steering system in drifting. So it's also my background. My old competition car used to be an S13 with an RB25 Neo. So I sort of knew the setup and I figured, well, if it works in that car, it'll probably work in this car. Similar architecture. They also have a McPherson strut. So I was like, well, it probably will work similar. But yeah, there was a lot of unknowns that I now know.
So the rear suspension in these is McPherson strut standard or Chapman strut, or similar kind of strut setup, but obviously the back of a S15 is something completely different.
Yeah, so it's just the entire subframe. So it's the multi-link Nissan rear end that they pretty much run in everything. But yeah, it's there's some challenges with that as well, as any sort of top level drifter will tell you from any ash chassis. A little bit hard to get some toe gain to stop happening and things like that. But yeah, it's a great rear end, especially compared to the sort of standard trailing arm, and even just the diff mounts are like a mustache bar and just stuff that would not handle the abuse of drifting.
So tried and true setup now of the S15, but I mean the wheelbase of this car and the track width factory and what it can accommodate is much different again to an S15. These are actually a lot shorter car than a lot of people kind of think by the appearance of the long nose anyway. Has there been any challenges around adapting that S15 kinematics, I guess you'd say, into a different package?
Absolutely. So I think the wheelbase is probably the most challenging part of the whole chassis, because every adjustment we do makes a huge reaction. So we can make a small adjustment to the rear and it will make a big difference. Same goes for the front. So that's been probably the biggest thing to get the car to actually handle like a competition drift car will handle. And then we can make it easy to drive, but it's slow. So then we add a bit of grip into it and it makes it twitchy and it's fast. So it's you're kind of hanging on for the ride. So it is fast and it is competitive as far as a lead lap is concerned, but getting the car to be able to comfortably chase behind other competitors has been the key issue.
And just a little bit more around the suspension in terms of the actual components you're using, adjustable arms on everything, I'd assume?
Yeah, so it's the entire Part Shop Max limit brake kit that they have. So that was developed by Matt Field at the time in his S14 Pro car. So it's got everything you need. It's got the ability to have upwards of 70 plus degrees of steering angle. It's got Ackermann Adjustment plates on the front. It's got all sorts of like toe arms and everything that you need for any adjustment. So luckily that particular kit has a lot of adjustment. So we were able to pull it in and push it and extend it probably far past what it was originally intended to do. But it allowed us to put in some sort of a base setup for the car.
So just wrapping up on the chassis side of things, the rear subframe itself is going to take a significant amount of fabrication to get in. Is that just all tied into the roll cage and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. So the whole philosophy of the car was to have a 240Z that actually drove like a S15. That was the goal. Obviously, like we just spoke about, we're limited to wheelbase, but essentially trying to scale everything down maybe to like a 90% version of it. So that was the original goal. So when the bare metal chassis was brought to Pace Innovations, I brought along with me a front and rear subframe, and they found a way to sort of tie in the roll cage. So essentially, you know, it's a 50-year-old chassis by now. So it's we had to pretty much make the roll cage part of the chassis and do a lot of do a lot of sort of stiffening areas and bring it up to competition level, really.
Yeah, like you said, 50-year-old chassis and that long nose and big engine bay is not really the best in terms of stiffness. They do a lot with more stiffening of the chassis, so the roll cage goes a long way there. We'll move on from that. Something that you mentioned at the start, a pretty special feature of this car is the engine and the drivetrain. Can you just dive into what's been done there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the whole concept of the car was to put a VR38 in a 240Z. It was just something that, I don't know why, I just had it in my head for years and years. I always wanted to build an old school Z drift car. That was something that I just wanted to do. And I actually tried earlier with a 280ZX and then ended up stealing all the engine out of it and built my S13 that I used to campaign. But with this car, I just wanted to go a step beyond with the RB and just get something that has a little bit more torque, because especially for competition driving, we want to have torque and power. It's not just about sort of peaky top end. It's about actually churning the tires when they're all gripped up. So I think the VR38 is a phenomenal engine, and it was definitely a challenge to get it in there. But making the car fit, making the engine fit rather, was one thing, but getting it all running and working in harmony was just a whole nother set of challenges that I wasn't really expecting.
So V6 twin turbo packaging compared to the original, inline six, it's not a matter of length in the engine bay, like it's actually the width that was the issue?
Yeah, so Pace did a really good job of actually putting the engine as far back as possible and as far low down as possible. So we were pretty much forced to run a dry sump setup because the sumps on those are massive, having the front drive shafts go through them. So a dry sump allowed us to drop the bottom of the block basically on top of the subframe as low as possible. So that was good, and then we pretty much put the thing up against the firewall. At the time, I was building it to a Formula Drift rulebook specification, so there's a particular size that you can cut out of the firewall. So we literally did that size and jammed the engine back as far as we could. So the really cool thing is the front of the engine is behind the strut towers. Knowing what I know now, maybe I would actually push it forward a little bit more, but we're kind of at that point where the turbo and the turbo manifold either had to be in front or behind the strut towers because it was just right in the way. So we opted to put it behind the strut towers because we have more room back there. But yeah, that again just opened up a set of challenges with just heat soak issues and cooking some of the electronic components as well, just from the amount of heat that you would expect coming from the turbo manifold and the rehousing and wastegates and everything as well.
So in terms of the actual engine performance itself, bolt-on upgrades or anything internally done?
Yeah, so standard internal engine. It's a set of Garrett GTX3071R. They're actually a mirror version of each other, which is really cool. So they're perfectly symmetrical. Same with the manifold, it's a perfect mirror of each other. So just the flow and the balance, and we almost like treat it like it's two inline three turbos. That's kind of the way that you might have to set it up. But yeah, it's a beautifully like sort of symmetrical engine, and even the way that we're trying to do the intercooler piping and that sort of stuff is to keep everything equal and create this sort of like maybe not like a Venturi effect exactly, but just kind of like a symmetrical flow, I guess you could say. From what I understand with even the VQs and stuff as well, that's how you sort of make the good power and hopefully get some noise out of them, because V6s, we all know, they're probably not the best sounding engines, but this thing's got a very particular sort of bark and tone about it, just being a VR. I quite like it. It sounds great when you're in the car as well, especially with the gearbox, the straight car gears are really cool.
We'll get to the gearbox in just a second. So just to clarify, roughly power range, what are we working with?
So at the moment, it's making anywhere from 600 to 700 kilowatts at the wheels. Wow. So I think at a certain point, the engine will make more power, but we'll probably end up creating too much torque that you might just bend a conrod or snap a crank or something like that. So it's at a point where the engine could make more power, but we might have to actually cap it at a certain boost limit or depending how hard we ramp it in. But we've run out of injectors at the moment, so it's kind of saved us for going too crazy. But I think we'll get a set of bigger injectors in and see what sort of safe, reliable numbers we can push after that.
Yeah. I mean, 700 kilowatts, 700 kilowatts, that's 900-ish horsepower for those who aren't familiar. How much does this car weigh? Have you had it on corner scales?
Yeah, this car, I think, is somewhere in the realm of maybe 1,100 kilos wet.
Okay.
Depending if I'm in it or not, I guess, So pretty light car. I think anywhere near 1,000 kilos is going to be a light, fast car. So that's what I mean. As small as it is and as short as it is light as well. So it just comes with a bit of a trade-off.
Cool. And the rest of the drivetrain there, you mentioned straight cut gears just before. What have we got for a gearbox?
So the gearbox is Albins ST6 6-speed sequential. So yeah, beautiful gearbox. Really grateful for them for coming on board when we built the car originally. So they hadn't actually done a VR38 bell housing at the time. So we worked with them to develop a bell housing for them, and it sort of worked out for me as well.
And then just finally onto the diff at the back and the axles as well.
Yeah, so it's actually a R32 GTR sensor. So just like a Nissan, like a Nismo LSD. So yeah, it's been pretty good. We've had to sort of play with the clutches and that sort of stuff to get the right aggression without creating too much heat in there. It really probably needs an oil diff cooler, so we're going to put that on. But we're also using R32 GTR rear half shafts as well. So yeah, they're quite strong.
Yeah, right. That's impressive that can hold up to that power. I guess relatively light car kind of makes sense. But finally, the brakes on the car. Notice like they're obviously, these are rear drum brake cars originally. Now you've got 2 rear calipers. What's the kind of setup there?
Yeah, so with the brakes, it's pretty simple. R33 GTST like turbo brakes. So bang for buck. I mean, I don't know, they're probably going through the roof now, but at the time they were just like the easiest, cheapest thing. It's not a circuit car, so it doesn't need to stop that well, but we've got a good set of Project Mu pads and rotors on it, and then the rear's got a twin caliper setup. So the Parshot Max rear knuckle has a twin caliper bracket that we can adapt another just a hydraulic handbrake caliper.
So I think we've covered most of the kind of mechanical components there. Just on the electrical side of things, what's running the show?
Yeah, so MoTeC came on board and supplied us with an M150. So amazing ECU. It's actually been a little bit of a challenge to find someone that can fully unlock its capabilities, but we just had the car up at Nick Ashvin's place in NA Motorsport. So we've just rolled it off the dyno yesterday, and we've had to run down here last minute. So I'm pretty excited to get it out on track and to see how it feels, because on the dyno was an absolute monster. So.
Yeah. So first time driving it in a while. What's the kind of future plans for the car moving forward?
So future plans is basically just get it reliable. We would just want the car to be able to turn up to the events and finish the events. So it's just been some challenges with the electronic issues, like I said, mainly with the heat soaking and the packaging. So we've done a lot of heat wrapping, a lot of ceramic coating. We've made some heat shields, all sorts of stuff to keep all that under wraps.
Well, all the best moving forward. It will be exciting to see where it all goes. If anyone wants to follow along with what you're doing and the car's progress, where are they best to do that?
I'm probably most active on Instagram, so you can follow me on Dimmack Driven, so DIMMACK_driven. So it's the same handle on YouTube as well, and any other socials. So.
Okay, well, thanks for your time.
Awesome, thanks for having me, appreciate it. Cheers.
If you like that video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you're subscribed. We release a new video every week. And if you like free stuff, we've got a great deal for you. Click the link in the description to claim your free spot to our next live lesson.